All right. Good evening. This is Tennessee State Guard Sergeant 61st Medcom, Matthias Montoya, and I will be teaching you guys today on S categories and TO&Es and how they all work within each other. So, S category. An S category is another word for section, the specific section. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, so on and so forth. Within each section is a list of responsibilities that go along with each section. So an S1 deals with something specific, so does S2, S3, S4, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. There is no S5, there is an S6, there is an S7, there is no S8, and there is S9. So it's S1, S2, S3, S4, S6, S7, and S9. And we'll be going over specifically which one does what. Alright, so within each unit, within each regiment, everyone has a different set of S's. Alright, those S1s, those S2s, so on and so forth, report to your XO. So what does your executive officer does? He's in charge of the S shops. And then the XO reports to the colonel. And then another one that you may do is not only will you report to your XO, sometimes you'll have to report and ask things from the G categories. So what are the G categories? Well, your S1 is your sections, your G1 is your generals. Basically, it's the headquarters equivalent. G1, G2, G3, so on and so forth is the counterpart to your S1s. So that's tippity top. So if you work in G1, G2, so on and so forth, you have reached basically the culmination. This is where a lot of the higher ranking, this is where you're going to find your chief warrant officers, this is where you're going to find your majors, this is where you're going to find your master sergeants, sergeant first classes, sergeant majors, basically. So, without further ado, let's get on to the way. So you're S1. I'm S1. It's personnel and human resources in general. What do? We keep track of records. We're paper pushers and we're record keepers. Our job is to basically be the librarians of your unit. We're going to make sure you guys get ID cards. We're going to make sure you guys get awards. We're going to make sure you guys get everything that's rightly due to you. Your right pay grade, your right, when we bring you in. We keep track of all that stuff so that you don't have to. At least that's the plan. Some things slip through the cracks, and obviously you should always keep a comprehensive list of everything you have attained. But our job is human resources and personnel, to keep track of everything. Training certificates, awards, stuff like that. So, I am an S1 enlisted. I work within the S shop. I am not the S1. The S1 is another name for the S category officer. So, our current S1 is Chris Thomason, First Lieutenant Thomason. He is my boss. And he reports so on and so forth to the XO. So your S2 is security and intel. We do have one. However, I've been told to keep his name confidential and redacted. His job is security and intel. He'll be giving briefs. He'll be making sure security plans are put in place. And he'll also brief the colonel and the round table of S categories for any kind of operation that we'll be doing. His main job is to gather information, to basically analyze it and put it to where it's viewable and everyone can understand it, as well as come up with security plans. So that is what S2 does. So your S3 is operations. Operations, of course, their job is, if the whole unit is a machine, their job is to make sure that it is oiled, that it runs smoothly. They're the mechanics. If something goes wrong, their job is to find out what the problem is, find out who it needs to go to, or if they need to fix it themselves and keep going, basically. Their job is to keep the operation flowing. So, your S4 is your logistics. Logistics obviously keep up with supplies. What do we need? When do we need it? How are we going to get it from who? And obviously deals with everything else. Their main job is supplies, logistics, and record keeping of those logistics. And those record keepings, guess what? That has to go to the S1 and also has to go to the S9, which we will discuss later. Everything is interwoven. But however, S4 is logistics and supply. That's their main job. So, our S6. S6 is communications. Anything to do with radios, anything to do with technology, anything to do with teaching people about those said things and operating said things is the S6's job. So, communications, S6. If you need to know how to communicate with somebody, or you need to set up something to help communicate with somebody, Their job is not only know the different ways of communication, how to operate those modes of communication, and overall be able to keep the unit inside the communication table. So your S6, your S7 is training. Their job is to keep up with your training certs and to prepare and get training for all the people in your unit. And they send their certs, they send it to me, an S1, and so we keep track of that. Their job is to build classes, find the supplies for classes, basically plan those classes, and execute those classes however they need, and then keep up-to-date training on everyone. So they keep kind of the master list of who needs what training. So we go into S9. S9 is finances. So obviously, State Guard is an all-volunteer organization, but when we are deployed, like we currently are, it's going to be your pay. They usually take care of your pay periods. They take care of your per diem. They make sure you're getting paid right, that you're at the right pay grade, and that you are receiving that, taking care of your direct deposits, having control of your confidential information. And they obviously work with all the others. So there you go. So just to review, S1 is human resources and personnel. S2 is security and intel. S3 is your operations. S4 is your logistics and supply. Your S6 is communications and technology. Your S7 is training and without the whole company. With the whole company. And your S9 is finances. So, like I said, those report. Everyone within those categories reports to their S category officer. And those S category officers report to the XO. The XO reports to the colonel. But the XO's main job is to take care of those people, the S shops, and make sure everything runs smoothly. All right, so TO&E slots is another thing. What is TO&E? It's table of organization and equipment. Basically, it's how the unit sees you. You have your MOS, which is your military occupational specialty. Like for me, I am a healthcare specialist, also known as a combat medic or a 68 whiskey. That is my base job. My TO&E slot is my S1. I am a human resource specialist within the 61st. So if I got transferred to another unit, I'd have to find something else to do. Or they may keep me in the one spot. Depends. But what I'm saying is your job within the unit versus your job as Big Army sees you or how Big State Guard sees you is different. The Army sees you by your MOS. The unit sees you by your TO&E slot. So, at the end of the day, I call back to being a medic. I have additional training in something else, but at the end of the day, it goes back to being a medic. I will never not be a medic. But I may change my TO&E slot, depending on my training or where they need me within the organization. Alright? So, I challenge you guys to think about some stuff you might. And come to me. I have a master list of all the TO&E slots within the 61st. Or just something that gives you a bright idea. So come to me and think about what you may want to do within the organization. Or if you have no idea, just come up to me and we'll go through everything and we'll say, is this something you want to see yourself in? And I'll set you on that path. One thing I will have to say is you do not have to be in a S category. You can be what's called a operational person. Okay? Not in operations, as in you are in the S3 category, you work. You're just a worker bee. You don't want to do any of the S categories. You don't want to do that. You don't want to specialize in that. You just want to be a worker bee. What's the big difference? Well, that comes back to ranks. Okay, so for me, if I stayed on this track, I would become a master sergeant because that would be my specialty. I'd be specialized in something, or I'd become a warrant officer in human resources. Okay, those would be my two paths. If I decided I didn't want to do S1 stuff and I just wanted to become back being a worker bee, I would become a first sergeant because I would just be a worker bee. I'd be in charge of people and organization. Okay, so that's the big difference. All right, so if I stay in the S categories and you are in the S categories that's enlisted, you'll probably become a master sergeant. You'll be the sergeant of that category. If you stay a worker bee, that's when you get into first sergeant and command sergeant major stuff. All right, well, this has been it. Hua, and I hope you guys understand. Out.